Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Dan Markel. Dan Markel was born in Toronto, Canada. In 1970, he was a highly intelligent and successful individual. Dan attended several universities, including those in Jerusalem and Cambridge, before earning his law degree from Harvard in 2001. After spending a few years working as a clerk in a law firm, he received an exciting opportunity in 2005. Florida State University was seeking someone with his qualifications to join their law school, and he accepted the position. Dan was well suited for this role because he enjoyed teaching and had a passion for criminal law. While teaching various legal subjects at the university, he also dedicated time to writing numerous papers on criminal law. Dan's life took a positive turn when he met his new partner, Wendy Adelson, on a dating site for single Jews. At the time, Dan was 33 and Wendy was 26, and they seemed to get along very well. Both shared a passion for criminal law and later taught at the University of Florida. Their relationship progressed rapidly, leading them to get engaged and married on February 26, 2006. They enjoyed a fulfilling life together, each having their dream jobs and good incomes. In 2009, they welcomed their first son, followed by a second in 2010. Everything seemed wonderful until 2012, when their relationship deteriorated, resulting in their separation before their divorce. The couple kept the reason for their separation a secret, leaving others unsure why their marriage ended so abruptly. By 2013, they were divorced. One day, Dan returned from a business trip to find that most of the furniture in the house was gone. Wendy had taken most of their belongings with her, leaving only a few items behind. The process was quick. It only took her a day and a night to move. Her quick action to clean up the house showed how bad their marriage had become. Wendy left divorce papers on the mattress. Wendy seemed determined to hurt Dan as much as possible. She changed the children's last names to hers, and even changed one of her sons' names. Wendy tried to erase everything related to Dan from her life and the lives of her children. Trying to cut a father out of her children's lives could be considered cruel and vengeful. In 2014, Dan and Wendy were living separate lives. Wendy had started writing and attempted to publish a law book on human trafficking. However, her approach was different from Dan's, and the book was a complete failure, receiving harsh criticism. As a result, few people were interested in buying it. On July 18, 2014, Dan went to Wendy's house to pick up their kids for preschool, which was part of his usual routine. He also went to the gym and stopped by a few stores. But nothing out of the ordinary happened that day, until he returned home around 11:00 a.m. When he arrived, he saw that someone was waiting for him. Although the details of his phone conversation at that moment were not public, it was reported that the person waiting for Dan was there to ambush him. Before Dan could open the car door to get into the house, a bullet wounded him. A neighbor heard the explosion and ran out. Dan was still in the driver's seat. Surrounded by broken glass, the neighbor quickly called 911. The neighbor later reported seeing a car pull into the driveway just before the gunshots. He saw Dan in the front seat, in critical condition, still alive, but unable to call the police. When the ambulance was called, the police tried to get information from a neighbor. The only thing the neighbor saw was a silver Toyota Prius leaving the area right after the gunshots. The ambulance then arrived, and Dan was taken to the nearest hospital. Unfortunately, his injuries were quite serious, and Dan passed away in the intensive care unit 14 hours later. Dan, a man who seemed to have no enemies and was loved by everyone, was shot dead in his own driveway. A memorial service was later held for Dan Markel, attended by friends, family, and students who wanted to express their love, respect, and admiration for the professor. The main task of the police was to find a silver Toyota Prius that could be linked to the case, provided by a neighbor. At the same time, the police also began questioning his ex-wife, Wendy Adelson. She was brought in for questioning on the same day Dan was killed. As Wendy entered the interrogation room, she received a voice message from a friend who was a real estate staff. The message stated that there had been a shooting near where Wendy used to live and that she hoped Wendy was okay. The voice message continued, explaining that there had been a shooting at Wendy's old home and that her ex-husband was seriously injured and would likely not survive. Wendy was very upset and began to cry. She said that she had emailed Dan that morning and that everything seemed fine. She then asked the police what had happened to Dan. The police responded that they could not share any information until they had confirmed her whereabouts at the time of the shooting to rule her out as a suspect. Wendy told the police that she had left her home around noon to run an errand. When the police asked her if she knew anyone who would want to hurt Dan, she burst into tears and struggled to answer. She finally said that Dan was sometimes mean to people, but she couldn't believe anyone would be cruel enough to hurt him. The police then asked if Dan owed anyone money, and with tears in her eyes, Wendy revealed that Dan owed her child support. She seemed genuinely shocked by the situation. Police ruled out robbery as a motive because the killer did not try to break into a home or car or search pockets for valuables like a wallet, house keys, or credit cards. At the time, the only motive they could consider was revenge. But what could he have done to make someone pull out a gun and shoot someone in broad daylight like that? To gather more information, the police appealed to the public for help. Police confirmed that the murder was intentional and offered a reward for tips leading to an arrest and conviction. The reward started at $10 and increased to $25 over time. Additionally, an anonymous donor contributed a separate $100 reward. Police expanded their search for suspects by interviewing students, friends, and family members. However, their efforts were unsuccessful. As everyone described Dan as a kind person, no one could explain why anyone would want to harm him. 12 months after the crime, there have been no new leads. Police held a press conference and released a photo of a silver Toyota Prius. They did not explain why they waited a year to share this information. Further appeals from the public have yielded no results, and nearly 2 years have passed without any new leads in the case. The perpetrator has had enough time to destroy all evidence, making it difficult for police to solve the case. This continued until May 26, 2016, nearly 2 years after Dan's murder. A Leon County judge issued an arrest warrant for Sigfredo Garcia, a 30-year-old man charged with first-degree murder in the death of Dan Markel. Tallahassee police did not release details at the time of the arrest. However, a few days later, police learned that Sigfredo had an accomplice, Luis Rivera, also 30, of Miami, who was seen driving a rented silver Toyota Prius between motels on July 16-17. Police collected various pieces of evidence about the couple, including cell phone records, electronic toll collection data, and surveillance footage from nearby buildings and buses. They believed that on July 18, Dan was being monitored as he went about his daily routine, which included trips to kindergarten, the gym, and shops before heading home. However, one question has been raised: why would these two men kill someone they apparently never met? Police suspect that this may have been a contract killing, implying that Sigfredo and Luis were paid to kill Dan. If this was indeed a contract killing, then who hired them? Sigfredo and Luis realized that no matter how much money they were paid, their crimes could not be hidden. They then began to confess to the police that they were hired by Charlie and Donna Adelson. Charlie was Wendy's brother, and Donna was her mother. On the surface, they seemed to be respectable people. Running a pathology clinic together, Charlie worked as a dentist, while Donna focused on patient care. However, This information was not enough to convict Charlie and Donna. The police knew that the suspect could name anyone to save himself to find answers. The police turned to a woman named Catherine Magbanua. She was related to Charlie Adelson and was also the ex-wife of Sigfredo Garcia. Phone records show that Catherine received a call from Luis shortly after Dan's murder. Likely to inform her that the mission was complete, Catherine was the sole intermediary between Luis, Sigfredo, and Charlie, as they had never met. Over a 12-month period, Catherine sent tens of thousands of dollars, starting a few months before Dan's murder and continuing for months afterward. Most of the payments were made by check, a risky option for Donna's family because checks were easily traceable due to the signature requirement. Each check sent bore Donna Adelson's signature. After investigation, it was discovered that Donna had a strong dislike for her former son-in-law, especially in the months leading up to the murder. She had sent a series of angry emails, filled with curses and insults, aimed at Dan. In these emails, she used every vulgar word she could think of to describe him, while the entire Adelson family lived in Miami. Wendy lived in Tallahassee, near Dan's home. She wanted to move to Miami to be closer to her family, but Dan was against it. He did not engage in any violence or threats against Wendy, which allowed him to go to court and get a judgment preventing her from moving away with the children. During their divorce, they agreed to split custody of the children. In a 50-50 agreement, however, there was another reason Donna hated him. Dan went to court shortly before he was murdered to file a motion to prevent Donna from spending private time with her children without supervision, while serving time for other crimes. Luis asked to speak to the police. He said he had information that could lead to a deal. The police agreed to meet with him. During questioning, Luis shared his story. He said he did not know Dan was going to be killed until he was in the car with Sigfredo. Previously, Sigfredo had told him it was just a simple robbery. After getting in the car and learning about Dan Markel's murder, Luis was upset and insisted that he did not want to kill a man he had never met, especially since the man had 2 children. Louis also mentioned a woman named Catherine, saying that she was behind the plan. Up to this point, Charlie and Donna continue to deny any involvement in the murder. Although the police have checks signed by Donna, however, these checks do not necessarily indicate that she intended to kill Dan. They could have been written for a variety of reasons. At this point, the FBI gets involved and formulates a plan. Charlie begins to receive unusual phone calls from a man identifying himself as Sandy. Sandy questions why Luis isn't being processed in prison. Although Charlie is frightened by the calls, he tries to remain calm and does not reveal anything incriminating. In reality, Sandy is an undercover cop. The FBI has also hacked into Charlie's cell phone in hopes of gathering evidence against him. In July 2016, a Leon County grand jury indicted Sigfredo and Luis for murder. Catherine was later arrested. Luis's charges were reduced to second-degree murder. Luis Rivera was sentenced to 19 years in prison. Catherine and Charlie's trials were held together on October 19, 2016. As they were facing the same charges, the defense argued that Charlie Adelson was the mastermind behind the murder plot, claiming he had promised to split $100 between the 3 of them so that Wendy could gain full custody without further interference from Dan. During the trial, the prosecution presented a key witness, Jeffrey Lucas, Wendy Adelson's ex-boyfriend. He testified that Wendy had told him that her brother, Charlie, had mentioned the idea of hiring a hitman to kill Dan several times. On July 13, Wendy asked Jeffrey if she could share something confidential. She revealed that Charlie had explored various options for dealing with her problems and had discussed hiring a hitman to eliminate Dan. At an estimated cost of $50, Sigfredo claimed in court that Luis fired the fatal shot. However, This defense was not enough to save Sigfredo from first-degree murder. Sigfredo Garcia was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 30 years for his involvement in the conspiracy. Sigfredo said he would appeal the sentence. Catherine denied any involvement in the murder during her trial alongside Sigfredo. Her charges were reduced to second-degree murder, but the jury could not reach a verdict. The judge declared a mistrial. This retrial began on May 16, 2022, and lasted 11 days. The jury was more decisive this time. And on May 27, 2022, Catherine Magbanua was found guilty of first-degree murder and incitement to commit murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 30 years for incitement and another 30 years for conspiracy. Although the three main perpetrators were thought to be incarcerated, a new arrest occurred on April 21, 2022. Police arrested Charlie Adelson at his home. He was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder. Following this, police discovered audio recordings of conversations between Catherine and Charlie discussing their conspiracy on the day of Charlie Adelson's trial. He was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years for each of the conspiracy and solicitation charges. As this case comes to a close, many questions remain unanswered. The defendant's testimony suggests that Dan Markel needed to be killed in order for Wendy to gain full custody of their children. This raises the possibility that Wendy may have had a larger role in this case than she admitted. However, it is important to note that there is no evidence to support this claim, and no charges have been filed against Wendy Donna Adelson, who signed several checks worth thousands of dollars, has a history of hostility toward Dan, was arrested at Miami International Airport on a warrant from Leon County. Donna was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder. Donna's trial is expected to begin in late 2024 or early 2025. Dan Markel's friends and colleagues still remember him and his great contributions to legal issues. Dan devoted his life to his children, which is why he was in court so often. Because he needed to make sure they would never be taken from him, his life ended tragically at the age of just 40. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Schmidt family. Tyler Schmidt was born on November 13, 1979, in Iowa, USA. He spent his childhood in Cedar Falls, a city home to the University of Northern Iowa. Tyler's early interests led him to join the Boy Scouts, where he earned the distinguished rank of Eagle Scout. This experience fostered his lasting love for nature and the outdoors. Growing up, Tyler enjoyed participating in camps organized by the Lutheran Church, which often brought his family together. Outside of school, he developed skills in playing the trumpet. However, his true passions lay in adventure and sports. At Northern Iowa High School in Cedar Falls, Tyler was a member of the cross-country running team and the swim team. During his free time, he also enjoyed outdoor activities such as canoeing, hiking, and snowshoeing. Tyler's interest in computing led him to Missouri's Truman State University, where he pursued a degree in computer science and met the woman who would become his wife, Sarah. Born in Kansas City on March 27, 1980, Sarah grew up near St. Louis with her siblings, Karen, Jane, and Adam, for part of her childhood. Sarah shared Tyler's passion for the outdoors, particularly bird watching and studying insects. Both had been heavily involved in scouting as young people, with Sarah earning the Girl Scouts' highest honor, the Gold Award. She credited her adventurous spirit to her mother, with whom she had gone backpacking in Central America. Given their compatibility and mutual interests, Tyler knew he had found his soulmate when he met Sarah. Sarah was a high-achieving student who excelled both academically and in leadership. As a result of her outstanding leadership skills, the prestigious Truman Scholarship while she was still at Washington High School in Washington, Missouri. This scholarship led her to attend Truman State University, where she met her future husband, Tyler. The couple started dating and eventually got engaged. Both families were supportive of their decision to marry, as they believed the two were meant to be together and start a beautiful family. On June 22, 2002, friends and family gathered at St. John Lutheran Church in Cedar Falls for Tyler and Sarah's special day. Guests took their seats under the guidance of the wedding coordinators, with Tyler's parents and Sarah's mother seated at the front, joined by her nearby siblings. Tyler's uncles and cousins were also in attendance. Sarah stood outside, preparing to make her grand entrance at her wedding ceremony. She was accompanied by her father, who would escort her down the aisle and give her away to her fiancé. The ceremony was a promise of love and commitment between the 22-year-old couple, who vowed to stand by each other until the end of their lives. Following the wedding, Tyler and Sarah embarked on a romantic 10-day honeymoon to the breathtaking Boundary Waters, a wilderness area on the U.S.-Canada border, situated between Minnesota and Ontario. This destination was chosen for its natural beauty, reflecting the couple's shared love of nature. After Tyler and Sarah got married, they focusing on building economic stability and advancing their careers. Following the completion of their bachelor's degrees in Missouri, they relocated to Lawrence and attended the University of Kansas. There, Sarah pursued a master's degree and later worked as a computer science expert, while Tyler divided his time among various roles, including jobs at a supermarket, a delivery company, UPS, and 18 years at a company that handled business billing and payments. During their early years of marriage, Tyler and Sarah maintained a balance between their professional lives and personal adventures. They made time for each other and regularly explored new outdoor destinations. The couple was social and enjoyed hosting family game nights and gathering with friends to play board games. They also participated in local community activities through the Lutheran Church and actively supported the Kansas Jayhawks basketball team, often attending tournaments at the Allen Fieldhouse. 2013 is a bittersweet year for Tyler and Sarah. It was the year Sarah's father unexpectedly passed away due to a heart attack, causing immense grief for his loved ones. However, in the same year, they welcomed their first child, Arlo, after 11 years of marriage. In 2015, the family grew again, with the birth of their beautiful daughter, Lula Schmidt, on September 17. 3 years later, when their children were 6 and 3, the family decided to relocate to Cedar Falls to be near Tyler's relatives. The community of Cedar Falls provided them a warm welcome, and they quickly became involved in local activities. Tyler maintained his software engineering job, while Sarah started working as a librarian's assistant at the local public library. Their children, Arlo and Lula, began attending preschool at Lincoln Elementary School. Known for their kind and helpful nature, Tyler and Sarah made those around them feel valued. This endearing quality earned them the love and respect of their neighbors and the community. Sarah's friendly and warm personality also made her a beloved figure at the library, where she was admired by colleagues and patrons alike. Tyler and Sarah made it a priority to share their love for the outdoors with their children, Arlo and Lula, encouraging them to explore and appreciate nature. In 2021, the family began going on camping trips, which the kids greatly enjoyed, even with their busy schedules. As a result, they decided to go on these trips as often as possible. However, by mid-2022, Sarah's work hours had increased substantially, which may have affected their ability to continue this family tradition. However, in June 2022, she took a day off to celebrate a special milestone, her 20th wedding anniversary. She also planned a family vacation to Mata Cave State Park in Jackson County, Iowa, for the week of July 11th. To make time for this trip, she set a deadline for a library project. July 26th, Sarah shared her plans with her sister-in-law, Kat, and was looking forward to exploring the park's 13 remarkable caves and beautiful landscapes with her family. On Thursday, July 21st, the Schmidt family embarked on a 140-mile road trip to visit Makata Caves. The family, consisting of Tyler and Sarah, both 42, and their children Arlo, 9, and Lula, 7, arrived at the campsite before 5 p.m. due to the crowded camping area. The Schmidts decided to set up their tent near the park's entrance. Later that evening, around 7 p.m., another family, the Sherwins, arrived and parked approximately 200 feet away from the Schmidts' tent. Joe, Cecilia, and their 23-year-old son, Anthony, from Nebraska, had been on a week-and-a-half-long camping trip that took them to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. When they were on their way back home, they decided to stop at Makata Caves, setting up 2 tents, one for the parents and another for their son Anthony. Anthony consistently showed great care and consideration for his parents' needs, and earning praise from his mother, who frequently described him as the ideal son, kind, empathetic, and an outstanding student. At the time, Anthony was working on a business venture that involved developing a computer system. He claimed the business had the potential to generate millions and planned to use some of the profits to support his parents financially. However, Cecilia knew very little about the project, as Anthony maintained secrecy and only revealed that he communicated via emails that were heavily encrypted and secure. At Makata Caves, campers had settled in for the night. However, their peaceful night's sleep was disrupted before dawn on July 22nd by the sudden sound of gunshots. A short time earlier, a man wearing black had entered the Schmidt family's tent. Inside, the attacker targeted Tyler and then Sarah. Arlo, who had been asleep, was jolted awake by the screams of his sister Lula. As he turned to see what was happening, he saw blood and was overcome with fear. Managing to escape the tent, Arlo ran to find help. As he fled, he heard the sound of one final gunshot. Cecilia and Joe, from the adjacent campsite, quickly exited their tent due to the commotion. Joe began searching for his son among the other campers, inquiring if anyone had seen him. Meanwhile, Arlo, still panicked, continued running until he met Cecilia and Joe. He was frantic, shouting and asking for help, explaining that his parents had been shot. Concerned for Arlo's safety, Cecilia took his hand, and together they rushed to the park entrance. She was filled with anxiety, knowing her own son was sleeping near the tent where the shots were fired, and feared he might have been hurt or worse. Cecilia called 911 after hearing gunshots and reported the incident to the operator, but struggled to clearly say the park's name, making it difficult to communicate their exact location. Cecilia also explained that she was with a boy who claimed his parents had been shot. During the 23-minute call, the 911 operator asked Cecilia questions, while simultaneously relaying the attack to police and park rangers. The call was briefly dropped, but Cecilia quickly called back. Despite the chaotic situation and her own nervousness, Cecilia managed to remain calm, thanks in part to adrenaline. Once she had provided more specific location details, Cecilia handed the phone to Arlo. Arlo explained to the operator that he had witnessed a horrific scene at his family's campsite. He said the operator that he was in a tent with his parents and sister, but when he woke up, he saw a person wearing black and holding a gun. When asked about his father's location, the boy was silent for a while, then responding that he thought his father was hurt. At 6:30 a.m., police and paramedics arrived, and after locating the Schmidt's tent, they discovered a horrific scene. All the occupants, including Tyler, Sarah, and Lula, were dead. This previously peaceful campsite had quickly become a crime scene. Police immediately launched a search for the shooter, who could potentially still be in the area. Following the attack, authorities promptly evacuated everyone from Makata Caves State Park and nearby Camp Shalom, a Christian summer camp about 1.5 miles away. The evacuees were assembled outside the park for a head count, which revealed that only one person, Anthony Sherwin, was missing. It was also discovered that Anthony was armed. An aerial search by police helicopters led to the discovery of a man's body at 11 a.m. Once officers reached the location, they found the man was deceased. He was identified as Anthony Sherwin. Preliminary investigations pointed to Anthony as the primary suspect in the murders. Authorities believed he had perpetrated the attack on the Schmidt family before taking his own life. The park was temporarily closed by authorities following the incident, with the closure lifted by July 28. The Iowa Department of Natural Resources offered its condolences for what had occurred. A spokesperson for the department expressed deep sadness and disappointment on behalf of the team, acknowledging that the incident had disrupted the long-standing tradition of Iowa families enjoying the state's natural beauty. However, the department remains committed to continuing its work in preserving the state's parks for the millions of families that visit each year. The citizens of Cedar Falls were deeply shocked when they received the news. The atmosphere in the town drastically somber and mournful. Family, friends, acquaintances, and even strangers were filled with grief. A heartfelt message was displayed in a window at the Cedar Falls Public Library, where Sarah had worked, paying tribute to Tyler, Sarah, and Lula, saying they may have left too soon, but their memories would remain forever in the hearts of those who knew them. After hearing of the tragedy, Tyler's software company mourned him, describing him as a highly skilled and dedicated professional who mentored his colleagues. His colleagues were deeply saddened by the news, remembering Tyler's love for his children, especially his child Arlo. The mayor of Cedar Falls shared his grief on Facebook over the loss of the 3 Schmidt family members. He knew Sarah, with whom he had worked on a technology project in the past. He called on the community to support Arlo, the sole survivor of the family, and shared a GoFundMe link for those wishing to donate. The initiative quickly raised more than $276,000 in just a few days. As a sign of respect for Sarah's co-workers, the local authority closed the library for the remainder of the day. The tragedy also drew reactions from other government leaders. The governor of Iowa conveyed her shock and sorrow over the unimaginable tragedy, while a U.S. House representative from Iowa denounced the crime as senseless and horrific. Sarah's family was deeply saddened by her passing. Her sister was particularly hard-hit, finding it impossible to accept that she would no longer be able to talk to Sarah and that she would miss out on seeing her niece grow up. Family members came from as far away as North Dakota, Texas, and Michigan to attend a private funeral service for Sarah at Greenwood Cemetery on August 2nd. A separate celebration of the lives of Tyler, Sarah, and Lula was held at the picnic area of Overman Park, attracting more than 200 people. At the ceremony, Tyler's aunt and the mayor took turns speaking at the podium to express their feelings and share memories of the deceased. The Schmidt family's loved ones struggled to cope with their grief, also as trying to provide comfort and care to Arlo. Meanwhile, authorities pressed on with their investigation into the brutal crime. According to an official update from the Iowa Department of Public Safety, the autopsies revealed crucial information about the victims' causes of death. Tyler sustained both a gunshot wound and multiple sharp force injuries. His wife, Sarah, had multiple sharp force injuries, but no gunshot wound. Tragically, their young daughter, Lula, suffered both a gunshot wound and was strangled. In August 2022, authorities identified Anthony Sherwin, a 23 years old with no prior crimes, as the person responsible for the Schmidt family's murder. He acted alone and later ended his own life. Despite the thorough investigation, police were unable to determine a motive for the attack. According to the Assistant Director of Criminal Investigation, Anthony had no connection to the Schmidt family before or during the time the two parties camped near each other. The Nebraska Police Department helped investigate the incident. During a search of the Sherwin family's apartment in Nebraska, officers did not find a suicide note or any other clues that could explain why Anthony targeted the Schmidt family and himself. A review of Anthony's Facebook page also did not provide any information about the incident or the weapons used. According to the Assistant Director of the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, the only confirmed weapon found was an unlicensed, hand-assembled firearm discovered near Anthony's body. This type of firearm is often referred to as a ghost gun. Because these guns lack serial numbers, they can be challenging for authorities to track and regulate. To verify the story, the police spoke with Anthony's parents. They confirmed that their son had created his own gun using instructions he found online. His parents described Anthony as very responsible and stressed that he had never hurt anyone or any animals. They also shared that their family had never owned guns before, but due to increasing crime rates in Nebraska, they had recently decided to acquire them. As they were inexperienced with firearms, they even took classes to learn how to handle them. The parents Anthony's had brought a homemade gun on the trip for protection against crime and possible bear attacks, which they had previously encountered while camping. They planned to dispose of the gun after returning home. Anthony's parents believed he was innocent and wanted to prove it. They thought he was a victim of murder, not the killer. His mother pointed to an autopsy report they obtained, which showed he had been shot twice. This contradicted the police claim that he had been shot only once. Anthony's mother questioned how he could have shot himself twice, which raised doubts about the police theory that he had taken his own life. The family Anthony's questioned the attacker's clothing description, as Cecilia remembered telling the 911 operator that the attacker wore black clothes. This did not match Anthony's clothes, green shorts that she had given him the day before the incident. Furthermore, Cecilia and Joe believe the police have withheld important information from them, such as where Anthony's body was found and whether the gun used to kill the family Schmidts was the same gun used to shoot Anthony. They specifically asked investigators if a ballistic test was conducted to confirm any matches, but received no response. Cecilia expressed her concerns in an email to the media. In the email, she said that her son had so many reasons to live, and she was sure that he would not give up everything in such a way. Cecilia also mentioned that she had seen no signs of him planning such an attack. And in her opinion, Anthony did not have the capability to kill. Furthermore, she believed that her son had no connection to the Schmidt family, which raised more questions. When Cecilia reached out to investigators, their response only added to her confusion. They simply mentioned that it was a random murder. Anthony's parents asked to see the final investigation report so they could arrange for a private review to be conducted. However, they state that they never received a response to this request. Around the same time, in January 2023, a news organization also requested public documents related to the case, but was still waiting for them. According to Iowa's Open Records Law and the Freedom of Information Act, a request was made for various documents related to the case, including incident reports, investigation files, crime scene summaries, and autopsy reports. However, the Iowa Department of Public Safety Commissioner's office responded that these documents were not publicly available. They could only release basic information about the case, which had already been included in the press release and its supplementary links. A few days after the inquiry, the media outlet sent an email to the official asking if the gun Anthony used to kill himself was the same one used in the Schmidt family murders or not. The official did not respond. So far, the police believe Anthony was a random killer who brutally murdered family Schmidt by shooting, stabbing, and strangling them. This conviction stands unless new evidence surfaces to prove otherwise. Anthony was also murdered, and those who knew him described him as kind, studious, and innocent. Following traumatic incident, Arlo, the sole survivor of a massacre, came to live with his relatives in Cedar Falls, CU the law entre qua Sarah. Recently, in an interview, Sarah's brother expressed admiration for Arlo's courage and the young boy's remarkable mental resilience. Following the tragedy, a fundraising page on GoFundMe was established to collect money for Arlo's care and to create a fund that will support his future education. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of April Jones. April Jones was born on April 4, 2007. April is a cheerful child, but she also has her own problems. Born 7 weeks early, she had some early health issues, but with medical support, she grew into a typical young girl. However, April was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, a condition caused by a brain injury, often due to a lack of oxygen at or shortly after birth. Cerebral palsy affected her lower body. Although her condition was not very severe, it caused her pain and made basic muscle movements difficult. Despite having a mild condition, she required special care. On October 1, 2012, at around 7 o'clock in the evening, 5 years old, April was playing outside with her friend at the Bryn Aeg housing estate in West Wales. Usually, April's parents don't let her go out to play when it's dark like that, but because she had received an excellent report card the day before, they allowed her extra playtime. April was supposed to return home after playing outside with her friend for about 20 minutes, but after that she did not return home. Her parents had last seen her on a bike, so they went out to look for her. They found April's 7-year-old friend nearby, but April wasn't with her. The friend explained that April had gotten into a car. Fortunately, she could describe the man who took April. He was wearing a green jacket, had blue or green eyes, brown hair, and a beard. Despite being young, the friend provided a crucial detail. She saw April get into the car on the driver's side. In the UK, the steering wheel is on the right side, which suggests the man was driving a left-hand drive car. Despite it being nighttime, but the police responded swiftly. The first officers reached the scene, the 999 call. While search teams were being assembled, authorities interviewed people who knew April to determine if anything unusual had occurred that day or in the days before her disappearance. April's family couldn't think of anything that could help the police. April had gone to her swimming class earlier that day, and after returning home, she was allowed to play outside with her friends. It had only been a short while since April went out, but it was getting late in the autumn, so it would get dark soon, making it very difficult to find her. News of April's disappearance spread quickly throughout the neighborhood, through word of mouth and social networks. Within hours, locals left their homes to help search her. Although their intentions were good, this outpouring of support hindered the police investigation. The police were grateful for everyone's enthusiasm, but they still needed to conduct door-to-door inquiries to see if anyone had seen April or seen the person who might have taken her. The problem was that very few people were at home because most had gone out to assist with the search. The story of April's disappearance quickly drew national attention. Television crews and reporters from all over the country flocked to the small town to cover the incident. At 10:30, the police provided a status update to the public and media, voicing concern as they still hadn't found any leads related to April. They appealed to anyone with information to come forward right away. On the evening of October 1st, authorities released more details about April's disappearance. At the time she went missing, April was wearing her school polo shirt and a purple coat. Over 100 people had joined the search to support the police. The local community played a crucial role in the search, as their knowledge of the area invaluable. In addition to locals, a large number of volunteers from England traveled to Wales to assist, and several people from South Wales also joined the search. The search was difficult due to the town's surroundings, which included mountains, waterfalls, gorges, dense forests, and uneven terrain, all of which were exacerbated by the cold, rainy, and overcast autumn evening. The police divided the volunteers into multiple search teams, which then combed through a vast area of about 60 square kilometers. After 8 hours of searching the difficult Welsh terrain, by 3:30 a.m., the volunteers had thoroughly covered the area. Although the situation was desperate, there was a poignant beauty in the fact that many people were willing to give their time to help find little April. This outpouring of support must have brought some comfort to her family, who waited anxiously by the phone for news. However, the police had prohibited the family from joining the search, fear that they might encounter terrible things about their daughter. On October 2, 2012, April was still missing despite extensive nighttime searches. In response, the police in Wales issued a child rescue notice, a nationwide alert that disseminated April's description and that of her abductor to all UK police agencies. This was the first time the child rescue alarm had been sounded nationwide. 14 hours after April's disappearance, the media began pressuring the police to release every detail of their investigation. The police faced criticism for their handling of the case. But it can be argued that this was unfair. They had responded swiftly, organizing search parties and searching for April throughout the night, doing everything possible given the challenging weather. Detective Superintendent Andy John led the investigation, keeping the public and media informed with regular updates. To aid the search, he established roadblocks where officers stopped and inspected every vehicle. Posters with April's photo were also distributed, aiming to spark anyone's memory that might help locate her. People living nearby and those from farther away had been sending reports to the police. Many of these reports mentioned the same name, Mark Bridger. Several locals identified Mark as matching describe April's kidnapper. He was known as a Land Rover driver with blue eyes and short facial hair, and notably, his car had a left-hand drive. Witnesses reported seeing Mark or his car near where April went missing. They found the last known address of Mark and multiple attempts to contact him. However, both Mark and April were not present at the address. Mark has never encountered any legal problems before. However, some local residents reported that he had participated in the initial nighttime search for April. Due to the large number of volunteers, it was not possible to verify this information. The authorities shifted their focus to locating Mark. They deployed helicopters to scour the area from above while officers searched all locations on the ground. They discovered that Mark had recently moved into a cottage called Mount Pleasant. When police arrived, they found no one living there and there were no cars there. They entered the cottage and called out April's name, but there was no response. It was initially unclear whether Mark had been evading authorities. At 4:30, police announced that Mark had been captured. Before, a police aircraft spotted him walking his dog on a country road near April's family home. He appeared to have altered his appearance by shaving his head and beard. Police helicopters led patrol cars to Mark's location. When stopped by officers, he provided his name without attempting to hide his identity. The officer then inquired about April's whereabouts, to which he responded that it was an accident, claiming he had unintentionally crushed her with his car and was now unaware of her location. During the arrest, Mark became visibly emotional. The arresting officers informed him of his rights, stating, "You do not have to say anything, but anything you say may be used as evidence." Strangely enough, Mark was eager to talk, even though he didn't have to. The officers reminded him that he was free to speak or not. Mark told them he had been searching for April on foot day and night. His car, a left-hand drive Land Rover Discovery, was in the garage. He denied abducting her and said he tried to revive her but panicked. He only learned her name that morning from the news. He wished he could remember where he left her, saying she was lifeless on the seat. He apologized to April's family. Meanwhile, in April's hometown, a large-scale search operation was underway. Police, canine teams, volunteers, and mountain rescuers scoured the Welsh countryside, but couldn't find her. Volunteers numbering in the hundreds from all over the country worked relentlessly, usually only sleep for a few hours, then continue searching. The police received over 600 offers of help, with many suggesting areas to search. Thanks to local expertise, over 20 areas were thoroughly checked. At this stage, detectives had Mark Bridger in custody and were interrogating him. Mark immediately began discussing the incidents of that day. He stated that he had no knowledge of April's whereabouts and described his activities, which included attending a parent-teacher conference at his daughter's school and then parking near his girlfriend's house, also which is close to April's parents' house. Mark admitted to consuming a few drinks and seeing two girls riding their bicycles. He remembered the dark-haired girl riding behind his car, and claimed that when he looked for the other girl, she was nowhere to be seen, but then suddenly her bike appeared. Mark admitted that he had been nearby at the time of the incident and April was hit by his car while she was riding her bike. He claimed he was drunk at the time. He stated that he didn't intend to harm April, but knew he had made a mistake. He said he took her into his car to rush her to the hospital. Mark described April's condition, said her face had turned pale, and her lips were purple. He acknowledged that his actions led to her death and mentioned that he knew her parents. However, after this admission, Mark's memory became unclear. Despite initially being open about his involvement, but he couldn't recall what he did with April's body after she died. Even though the police tried to interrogate Mark many times, but they were hindered when he suddenly claimed to have amnesia. He repeatedly stated that he was in his house, couldn't find April, and wouldn't have abandoned her. Initially, Mark was cooperative and honest with the police, but they began to doubt his sincerity when he claimed memory loss at the exact moment April went missing and suspected that he might be withholding information. The police decided to tread carefully, they aware that using an aggressive tone during questioning might lead Mark to refuse further cooperation. The police obtained a statement from April's 7-year-old friend, claiming that April voluntarily got into Mark's car, appeared happy, and was smiling. It is unlikely that someone would deceive a child in this way without reason or motive. However, the police also had a witness who contradicted this account. The witness reported that April entered the Land Rover through the driver's door, which is actually the left-hand side door in the UK. This contradicts Mark's story, suggesting that his testimony may be fabricated. When confronted with this new information, Mark became uncomfortable. Despite this, he maintained his original story and showed no signs of wavering under various lines of questioning. Detectives employed a novel approach by consulting Dr. Joe Sullivan, a renowned expert in criminal body language and behavior. Dr. Sullivan's involvement went beyond analyzing Mark's interviews. He also visited his home to gather information for a psychological profile. What he found was astounding. Mark's home contained an assortment of disturbing items, including knives, handcuffs, and a shotgun, some of which were concealed, while others were openly displayed. Furthermore, he worked at a slaughterhouse. According to Dr. Sullivan's assessment, Mark was a fantasist who identified himself with fictional characters like Rambo, indicating a disconnection from reality. Despite Dr. Sullivan's advice, the police took a paternalistic approach with Mark. However, he stuck to his story. The police then relied on forensic specialists to thoroughly search his house for evidence. The search team found small specks of blood in the restroom, but at that point, it was unclear whose blood it was. It was possible that the blood came from he cutting himself while shaving. The police sent the samples to the laboratory, but it would take up to 24 hours to get the results. Dr. Sullivan warned the police that Mark was unlikely to feel empathy or guilt about his actions. Although he might try to pretend otherwise, but Dr. Sullivan believed that he lacked these emotions. As a result, Dr. Sullivan advised the police that appealing to his better nature would be pointless, as he didn't have one. The police cannot expect Mark to be remorseful, sympathetic, or confess his guilt. The police took Dr. Sullivan's advice seriously and redetained Mark on suspicion of murder. This sudden turn caught Bridger off guard, and him pale. Furthermore, explicit child photos were discovered on his laptop, leading to his second arrest for possessing offensive images of children. As the investigation intensified, Mark suspected the police had more information than they were letting on. Meanwhile, April's parents were informed on Thursday, 3 days after her disappearance, that the police had shifted their focus from finding her alive to investigating a murder case. They had to break the devastating news to their children that they had lost a sister. Receiving news that their daughter was presumed dead, but her body hasn't been found yet, was a difficult pill to swallow. The police kept this information from Mark, but they also advised the volunteers who had been tirelessly searching for April to stand down and let the experts handle the situation. However, this suggestion was met with resistance from the hundreds of volunteers, many of whom were in tears as they left the site. On Friday, 4 days after April vanished, police search teams continued their search for clues. There was no evidence that Mark killed April, according to forensic experts. A thorough examination of his Land Rover revealed no marks, no blood, no hair, and no skin. This was despite Mark's claim that there should have been signs of April's injuries, such as scratches on the bumper or blood or hair inside the car. He tried to explain by saying he didn't see any blood on April after his car hit her. Although April was run over, she didn't appear to have any open wounds. However, Mark's story was about to be exposed as a fabrication. On Friday night at 6:15 p.m., the lab contacted the detectives. The results of the DNA comparison between April's toothbrush and the blood spatters found in Mark's restroom. They matched. Additionally, DNA evidence was found on his fleece collar and jogging bottoms. After gathering enough evidence, the police charged April. They found photos on his laptop, which they showed him during questioning. The photos depicted minors being sexualized, exploited, and manipulated. However, Mark denied any wrongdoing, claiming he didn't enjoy things, despite being shown the images and asked to describe them. The photos were disturbing and something no reasonable person would have. Mark also denied searching for explicit websites for personal gratification, even when confronted with his internet search history. After 3.5 days in custody, the police's 96-hour questioning period was almost over. They made one last attempt to get Mark to tell the truth. The decision to press charges now rested with the Crown Prosecution Service. The police questioned Mark about April's whereabouts and whether he intended to murder her. They pointed out that no blood was found on the bathroom walls at his house, yet a full DNA profile of April was discovered. Mark claimed that if he had blood on his hands and didn't dry them, he might have accidentally flicked blood onto the walls. However, this contradicted his previous statement that he hadn't experienced any issues with blood for a week prior. Despite the inconsistencies, Mark stuck to his story, stating that some blood must have been present, even though he had previously claimed there was no blood on him or April, or in the car. Mark was subjected to intense police questioning regarding the images found on his laptop. The police were struggling to find ways to get him to reveal the truth. When asked if he was using the photographs for self-gratification, he denied it. However, he did suggest that a buildup of sexual frustration might have contributed to his actions on the morning in question. Mark's composure eventually began to crack under the pressure of questioning. He became agitated, raised his voice, and started using profanity. It was clear that he took issue with being labeled a pedophile. After a lengthy and challenging process, the police were finally able to uncover Mark's true nature. They were convinced they had the right person and had already submitted the case to the Crown Prosecution Service, CPS. The CPS subsequently authorized the police to charge Mark with the abduction and murder of April Jones. When informed of the charges, Mark showed no emotion or remorse. As he arrived at court in a prison van, Everyone threw objects and shouted obscenities at him. Over the next 2 weeks, forensic investigators found more and more blood traces from April at Mark's house. The fireplace also contained several broken bones, but they were so badly decomposed that it was impossible to confirm if they belonged to April. On May 30, 2013, a jury convicted 47-year-old Mark Bridger of kidnapping and murdering April Jones. Judge Mr. Justice Griffith Williams described Mark as a chronic liar and a pedophile who had long harbored fantasies about young girls. However, the judge believed that he was not specifically targeting April, but rather was pursuing a young girl in general. Unfortunately, April became the poor victim of Mark's actions. Mr. Justice Griffith Williams immediately sentenced Mark Bridger to life in prison, with the details of his sentence to remain undisclosed to the public. Mark claimed that April's death was a tragic accident, resulting from his car hitting her. However, his credibility had been lost long before his trial in the eyes of both law enforcement and the judicial system. Given the overwhelming evidence against him, Mark was unable to escape justice. April was a young girl who was playing outside with her friend. Then she was targeted by an individual with a twisted mind. April's family was relieved that Mark would spend the rest of his life in prison, unable to harm any more children, despite their overwhelming grief. However, April's remains were never found after the trial. While 17 bone fragments were discovered in Mark's house, but it was impossible to point out that they belonged to April. April's passing has left an unfillable void in the hearts of her loved ones. It is hoped that her family and friends can find some way to rebuild their lives. A funeral service for April was held in her hometown on April 26, 2013. May April Jones rest in peace. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Anupama Gulati. Anupama, who lives with her husband and 2 children, was born and raised in Dehradun, but her parents and brother were often worried because they could not reach her on the phone. Since her family used to call her frequently, this loss of contact worried her family. Anupama's brother, Sujan Pradhan, decided to call Anupama's husband, Rajesh Gulati, whom she had been married to since 1999, to ask about his sister. However, every time Sujan Pradhan called, Rajesh would say that Anupama was either busy or had gone on a business trip. This went on for about 2 weeks. During this time, Anupama contacted her brother via email, informing him that she was completely fine and very happy with her husband and 2 children. This reassured her family. However, when they continued to be unable to reach Anupama on the phone, her parents asked Sujan Pradhan to go to Dehradun and meet Anupama. On December 12, 2010, when Sujan Pradhan went to Rajesh's house, Rajesh greeted him unfriendly and said that Anupama was elsewhere and he could not meet her right away. On the other hand, Sujan Pradhan tried to break into Rajesh's house, leading to heated arguments between the two. However, Rajesh did not allow Sujan to enter the house. When Sujan asked Rajesh about Anupama, Rajesh did not provide a satisfactory answer. Sujan decided to go to the nearby police station and filed a missing report for his younger sister, Anupama Gulati. In the report, he also said that he was trying to enter the house but was prevented by Rajesh. The police found the case suspicious and went to Rajesh Gulati's house. When Rajesh saw the police with Sujan, Rajesh tried to remain calm. The police asked Rajesh about Anupama, but Rajesh did not answer directly and tried to distract them. However, the police soon discovered Rajesh's cunning and decided to conduct a full search of the house. During the search, the police noticed a closed room. When the room was opened, there was nothing unusual except a large freezer. The police found the presence of a freezer very strange because such appliances are commonly used in large shops and restaurants. The police wondered why Rajesh would buy such a large freezer for his small family, but he just kept quiet. The police decided to open the freezer to investigate and found many small black bags inside. When they opened one bag, they discovered pieces of meat and then took out some more envelopes. The surprise came when they found a human skull in one of these envelopes. Rajesh Gulati then confessed to the police that the pieces were the body of his wife, Anupama. He broke down in tears and narrated the story. After his confession, the police arrested Rajesh and took him to a local court. There, he was remanded in custody for 5 days. During further investigation, the police discovered a surprising piece of information. Rajesh explained that he had met Anupama at Delhi University, where they both studied and got to know each other. They soon developed feelings for each other and started falling in love. Initially, they kept their relationship a secret from their families, but later decided to go public and asked for permission to get married. Both families agreed and they had a grand wedding in 1999. After marriage, Rajesh's career grew rapidly, and he found a job in a large company in the US. Rajesh and Anupama moved to the US so that he could work as a software engineer. They were living comfortably now, and they had bought a house, which meant that their finances were stable. However, after a few months, Anupama started feeling lonely because Rajesh often went to work every day and she had to stay home alone. During her boredom, Anupama often contacted a close friend of Rajesh's. Later, Rajesh found out that Anupama had become close friends with a close friend of his. Rajesh felt uncomfortable knowing that Anupama and his friend were talking on the phone frequently. This caused many arguments between them. Rajesh asked Anupama many times to stay away from his friend, but she did not listen. This made the situation worse in their home. However, in 2006, Anupama gave birth to twins, and the birth of a daughter and a son brought happiness and harmony to the family. While living in the US, Rajesh and Anupama enjoyed a fairly comfortable life. However, that was completely disrupted in 2007 and 2008 when the US fell into an economic recession, leaving many unemployed. Rajesh, after trying to keep his job for a while, also fell into unemployment. To sustain the family, Rajesh used his savings, but as the situation could not last forever, the savings eventually ran out. At that time, Rajesh had no choice but to sell his house in the US. After selling the house, Rajesh decided to return to India with his family. However, Anupama continued to keep in touch with Rajesh's friends over the phone, and this caused a major argument that led to a conflict between Rajesh and Anupama. The arguments escalated and the couple took the matter to the family court. The court eventually decided that Rajesh would provide Anupama with 20,000 rupees per month to meet their expenses. Thereafter, Rajesh and Anupama lived together in a rented flat for a few months in a place called Governor. After some struggle, Rajesh got a job in a big company in Kolkata, about 990 miles away from his home. For the sake of his job, Rajesh had to leave his wife and 2 children and start a new life in Kolkata. In Kolkata, around 2009, Rajesh met a married woman who was suffering from an unhappy marriage. Her husband was not good and often abused her. When Rajesh heard the story of this woman, he felt sympathy for her and gradually, the two became close friends. Gradually, their friendship developed into love. After some time, they decided to marry each other secretly at a temple in Kolkata, without informing any of their family or friends. Rajesh returned to his normal routine after his second marriage. He maintained regular contact with his first wife, Anupama, went to work daily, and kept his second marriage a secret from everyone. However, Anupama noticed changes in Rajesh's behavior and suspected that he was involved with another woman in Kolkata. But she was unaware that Rajesh had actually remarried. The couple continued to argue over this issue and their relationship became so strained that Anupama started thinking about divorce. However, Rajesh successfully convinced Anupama and they did not go through with the divorce. But when Rajesh failed to pay Anupama, the court ordered maintenance of 20,000 rupees. These financial disputes finally reached a boiling point on October 17, 2010, when Rajesh and Anupama had a huge argument. Rajesh becomes enraged and violently pushes his wife, Anupama, causing her head to hit the corner of the bed. As a result, she starts bleeding profusely. Initially, Rajesh is shocked, but moments later, he lifts a pillow from the bed and uses it to smother Anupama. However, unbeknownst to Rajesh, Anupama is already deceased. Rajesh then frantically searches for a place to hide his wife's body, aware that his children will soon return home from school. With time of the essence, he moves Anupama's body to the second bathroom in the house and locks the door. As he tries to devise a plan to dispose of the body without arousing suspicion, his children arrive home from school and ask about their mother. Rajesh fabricates a story, telling them that their mother suddenly left for Delhi. Rajesh's children believe their mother, Anupama, had gone to visit their grandparents in Delhi. However, Rajesh had other plans. While the children were in school, he went to the market and purchased several items, including a deep freezer, an electric chainsaw, a stone cutter machine, and small black envelopes. When Rajesh brought these items home, he hid them in a separate room. When the children left for school the next day, Rajesh began the gruesome process of dismembering Anupama's body with an electric saw. He closed all the doors and windows to block out the noise. According to Rajesh's statement, Rajesh cut Anupama's body into 72 pieces. He then placed each piece into black bags and carefully stored the bags in the deep freezer to prevent the smell of the deceased from spreading. This process took Rajesh several days to complete. During this time, Rajesh continued to deceive Anupama's parents and brother by making excuses whenever they called, unaware of the horrific events unfolding at his residence. Rajesh took steps to cover up Anupama's disappearance by making excuses to their neighbors and telling their children that their mother had traveled to Delhi. He also had access to Anupama's email account, which allowed him to maintain communication with Sujan Pradhan, Anupama's brother, making it seem as though Anupama was still alive. Following the murder, Rajesh took the children on a weekend trip to Mussoorie in Uttarakhand. During the trip, he would collect 2 or 3 envelopes from the fridge containing pieces of Anupama's body and dispose of them in the forests or gorge along the way. This revelation shocked everyone, and the police began searching the areas where Rajesh claimed to have disposed of Anupama's remains. After an extensive search, the police found some black bags containing body parts in the surrounding forests and gorge. Based on this evidence, Rajesh Gulati was arrested and sent to jail. Rajesh Gulati's twin children were sent to Delhi to live with Anupama's brother, Sujan Pradhan. A court had granted Sujan official custody of the children on March 7, 2011. Rajesh Gulati's father, Satyapal Gulati, appealed this decision but was unsuccessful. On November 3, 2012, the court dismissed his appeal and confirmed that Chari would retain custody of the children. Evidence provided by the police revealed the horrific nature of the crime. Rajesh Gulati had brutally murdered his wife and then cut her body into 72 pieces. After a 7-year trial, Rajesh Gulati was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment on September 1, 2017. He was also ordered to pay a fine of 1.5 million rupees. The court ordered that 70,000 rupees of the fine would go to the state treasury, while the remaining amount would be deposited in the names of the twin children. The children would have access to this money only after they came of age. Rajesh Gulati was sentenced in a lower court, but he appealed this decision in a higher court in 2018. However, there has been no ruling on his appeal yet, resulting in his prolonged imprisonment. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ariel Castro. Ariel Castro was born in 1960 on July 10 in the city of Yauco in Puerto Rico. Ariel was the third child in a poor family of 4 children, including parents Liliana Rodriguez and Pedro Castro, and sisters O'Neill, Pedro and older sister Bonita. Ariel's family barely made ends meet and his parents were constantly arguing. Before Ariel went to school, his parents divorced. His mother Liliana took care of all the children. Now Liliana had almost nothing left to feed her children. In desperation, Liliana and her children decided to move to the United States and settled for a while in southeastern Pennsylvania. In the city of Reading, however, they soon moved to the neighboring state of Ohio and eventually settled in the city of Cleveland. Soon after, Ariel's father Pedro Castro also moved to Cleveland with his new wife and their children. Pedro Castro lived near Liliana and her children. Liliana later married, and Ariel soon had 4 more siblings. Ariel attended Lincoln West High School in Cleveland, graduating in 1978. In addition, Ariel also studied music and attended church regularly with her mother and siblings in a traditional Catholic family. As a teenager, Ariel met a young girl named Grimilda Figueroa, who lived next door to Castro. The two became friends while attending school, and Ariel and Grimilda later began dating. After saving money, Ariel and Grimilda decided to move to a house on Seymour Avenue in southwest Cleveland. The 2-story, 1,300 square foot house was built in 1890 and has been remodeled several times. Inside, there are 4 bedrooms, a dining room, a bathroom, and a spacious basement. However, since moving into the new house, Ariel regularly beats Grimilda and humiliates her morally and physically. Grimilda is still naive at this time and thinks that the situation will improve after the wedding and the birth of the child. However, as time goes by, the situation only gets worse. Grimilda tries not to let anyone know about the terrible things that are happening in her life. Grimilda hides her injuries under her clothes and makes up excuses for the injuries that cannot be hidden. In 1993, Ariel beat his wife so brutally that Grimilda suffered broken ribs, nose, and both arms from falling down the stairs after being pushed by Ariel. However, Grimilda steadfastly refused to report the incident to the police. The incident was covered up. Ariel repeatedly beat Grimilda in the mid-1990s. On one occasion, Ariel caused Grimilda a serious head injury that resulted in a blood clot and a tumor that could not be surgically removed. Ariel was arrested but released just a day later. By the late 90s, Grimilda was tired of the constant beatings and living in fear. Grimilda finally decided to file for divorce, took away the appliances, and moved out of the house. Grimilda won custody of all 4 of their children, Arlene, Antonio, Angie, and Amelia. However, Grimilda's nightmare did not end there. Ariel began to pursue Grimilda for money and threatened her to return to him. Realizing that Grimilda could not handle it on her own, Grimilda finally decided to report to the police to get a restraining order against Ariel. In late April 2012, Grimilda suffered complications related to an inoperable tumor caused by a head injury. Grimilda's children were old enough to care for themselves and live their own lives, so they did not need a guardian. However, the children still maintained contact with their father Ariel. Back in the early 2000s, Ariel lived alone in a 2-story house on Seymour Avenue. Ariel worked as a school bus driver and had a passion for playing the guitar. Ariel often performed at city festivals in Latin bands. His neighbors often spoke highly of him, praising his hospitality and kind personality. However, there were many strange things in Ariel's actions that went unnoticed. That he was prosecuted several times for traffic violations while driving a school bus. He had speeding and dangerously making U-turns, for which he was fined and even suspended for a while until he was fired in early 2013 for an act that threatened the lives and health of his young passengers. Additionally, Ariel frequently changed bands because Ariel was kicked out for being late, disrupting rehearsals and concerts. Another strange thing is that after his divorce from Grimilda, he never invited anyone to his house, although Ariel often invited neighbors to barbecues in his backyard. It's hard to say how dangerous this smiling, kindly-faced Ariel was. Michelle Knight was Ariel Castro's first victim. In 2002, on August 23, Ariel decided to kidnap Michelle Knight, then 21 years old. Michelle Knight was born in 1981 and came to Cleveland. Michelle was a frequent runaway and had a history with the police. After becoming a single mother, Michelle faced the risk of losing custody of her 2-year-old child. On the day of the incident, Michelle visited a relative's house and then had to go to court, where the issue of regaining custody of her 2-year-old child had just been decided. While walking down the street, Michelle saw Ariel Castro driving up and offering her a ride. Since Michelle knew the nearby school bus driver, she didn't suspect Ariel and decided to get in his car. On the way, Ariel tells Michelle that he is taking care of puppies at home and invites Michelle to visit them and help Ariel find homes for the puppies. Michelle agrees, but as soon as she enters Ariel's house, he changes completely. Ariel becomes violent and begins hitting Michelle repeatedly. Ariel then chains her up and takes her to the basement. Over the next few days, Ariel starved Michelle and denied her water. Michelle endured constant beatings and abuse. She could not even get up and had to beg Ariel to let her go, promising not to tell anyone about it. When Michelle's mother reported her daughter missing to the police, for years the police did not prioritize the case and allocated limited resources to the investigation. Michelle's family searched for the girl themselves by contacting neighbors, friends, and concerned people. They also asked for help from Ariel, who helped post flyers around the city with Michelle's picture. However, no one knew that Michelle was being held in Ariel's basement. Ariel's second character was Amanda Berry. This girl was kidnapped in the spring of 2003. Amanda was a young girl who lived near Ariel and worked at a local restaurant. She was born on April 22, 1986 and was about to celebrate her 17th birthday. However, on April 21, 2003, Amanda mysteriously disappeared. After her shift, Amanda called home and told her sister that she would be home soon. As Amanda left the restaurant and headed to the bus stop, Ariel drove up to her and offered to give Amanda a ride home. Amanda accepted. Amanda knew Ariel's son because they had been in the same class for many years. So Amanda trusted Ariel and agreed to go with him. However, Ariel lied to her along the way, saying that Ariel needed help. When Amanda entered Ariel's house, Amanda was trapped. Ariel raped her in public, then took Amanda to the basement. There, she met Michelle, who had been kidnapped and held captive for months. Amanda was also attacked, abused, and starved for days until Amanda's body was too weak to resist. A massive search was launched after Amanda went missing. Her disappearance was widely reported in the media and Amanda's parents appeared on popular television shows such as Oprah Winfrey and Montel Williams. They shared their story and urged anyone with information about Amanda's whereabouts to contact them immediately. On one show, famous psychic Sylvia Brown was invited on. After viewing a photo of Amanda, she said that the girl had died and her body was in the water. The words troubled Amanda's parents, but the mother, Louise Miller, continued to search for her daughter until she died in March 2006 of a heart attack. In 2012, a criminal named Robert Wolford suddenly confessed to Amanda's murder and offered to show them where her body was buried. Robert led police to a vacant lot in West Cleveland, claiming that he had buried Amanda there. However, a lengthy search failed to uncover any trace. Robert was later found to have lied for fame and television, leading to his being sentenced to an additional 5 years in prison for perjury and obstructing justice. In April 2004. This time, Ariel chose Gina De Jesus, a 14-year-old girl in his daughter's class. Ariel met Gina and another girlfriend after school. After chatting for a while, the two girls decided to go home separately. When they reached the corner of West 105th Street, Ariel met Gina and offered to take Gina home. Since Gina had known Ariel since childhood, having long been the father of her best friend, Gina got into Ariel's car without suspecting anything. Although it was daytime, there were no witnesses to the kidnapping because the streets were deserted at that time. In addition, Gina took the initiative to get into Ariel's car, so there was no easily detectable conflict. The story of Gina's disappearance was aired on Fox TV's America's Most Wanted and was re-aired twice in 2005 and 2006. Ariel also posed as a volunteer looking for missing girls. When she brought Gina home, Ariel treated Gina similarly to Michelle and Amanda. Abused, sexually assaulted, and locked in the basement. It is believed that the kidnapping was carried out by a middle-aged Hispanic man. Was seen by a passerby. There was even a sketch that looked very similar to Ariel. During the 10 years of their captivity, Ariel constantly abused her victims. They were often starved, attempting to break their spirits and destroy their self-esteem. Severe punishments were also carried out if the three girls did not comply. Michelle, the oldest captive, suffered the most. Ariel would not spare her and would often beat Michelle to intimidate the other girls, forcing them to obey without asking any questions. After years of captivity in the dark and damp basement, Ariel moved them to a room on the second floor, which overlooked the courtyard. During her captivity, Michelle became pregnant at least 5 times. However, each time she showed signs of pregnancy, Ariel brutally attempted to terminate the pregnancy, starving Michelle and kicking her in the stomach until Michelle miscarried. After one brutal torture, Michelle almost died from severe blood loss. Despite this, Ariel remained completely indifferent and refused to let her call a rescue vehicle. The girls were not allowed to bathe more than once a week. To use the toilet, they had only a bucket of water, which Ariel rarely emptied. Ariel only fed the girls once a day but constantly beat and abused them. One day, Ariel gives the girls a puppy, but a week later, Ariel brutally kills the dog in front of them as punishment for Michelle's disobedience. Gina, in 2006, Amanda realizes she is pregnant and is horrified by the image of Ariel beating her to induce a miscarriage. Ariel this time let Amanda get pregnant and give birth. In preparation for the birth, he bought a special inflatable float. In December 2006, Amanda gave birth to a daughter named Jocelyn. Although the baby was born weak, she was lucky to survive. As Jocelyn grew older, the girls began to care for her and create a close environment for her. This helped them temporarily forget the difficult situation they were in. Ariel also changed significantly after having his daughters. Ariel began giving the 3 girls he kidnapped small gifts and sometimes letting them out into the yard with Jocelyn, but always under close supervision. Jocelyn was developing well, speaking clearly, and being taught to read, write, and count by her mother. Outwardly, she appeared healthy, well cared for and well fed. Despite being imprisoned for years under Ariel's relentless control, the victims attempted to escape many times, but each time they were brutally punished, but the girls never gave up hope. However, on May 6, 2013, Ariel left the house and forgot to lock one of the interior doors. This gave Amanda an opportunity. She left the room and went to the window that looked out onto the street. When Amanda saw a neighbor walking past the house, Amanda began banging and screaming at the window. A man heard a strange noise and stopped, thinking someone needed help. Another neighbor also heard the screams and decided to call emergency services. While waiting for the police to arrive, the men broke the lock on the front door and helped Amanda and her young daughter escape. When the police arrived, Amanda told them that her name was Amanda Berry and that she had been kidnapped 10 years ago. Amanda also said that 2 other kidnapped girls were being held in a house, in other apartments. All 3 were rescued and taken to hospital the same day. Amanda, her younger daughter Jocelyn, and Gina were not in critical condition, but Michelle had suffered severe physical and mental damage from the constant abuse. Michelle lost hearing in one ear and almost lost sight in her left eye. Many of Michelle's bones were bent and would not heal, requiring plastic surgery to restore the shape of her disfigured face. After the trauma and forced abortion, Michelle was unable to have children. When police received a report of 3 missing girls and a baby found in Ariel's home, Ariel Castro was arrested in a McDonald's parking lot just an hour later. Ariel's brothers, O'Neill and Pedro, were also arrested on suspicion of involvement, as they had been frequent visitors to Ariel's home. However, they were quickly released due to lack of evidence linking them to the case, as the victims had confirmed. Ariel was charged with forcible kidnapping, assault, battery, forcible confinement, cruelty, and taking the life of an unborn child. Ariel could have received a common law conviction. However, the prosecution required a death sentence. Ariel agreed to cooperate with the investigation and pleaded guilty. Ariel would recount all the events that took place in his home. In return, he would not be sentenced to death but instead to life in prison. Surprisingly, Ariel recalls in great detail the days of kidnapping the girls and bringing them into his home. Ariel recounted all the torture and abuse he had inflicted on his victims, but blamed the girls for unwittingly agreeing to get into Ariel's car and condemned himself to such a fate. On August 1, 2013, Ariel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On July 9, 2013, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus began a new life after being released from the Insanity's custody. After his conviction, Ariel was transferred to a rehabilitation center in Orient, Ohio, where he was closely monitored. However, on September 3, 2013, Ariel was found dead in his cell. At the time, Ariel was 53 years old. Ariel Castro's family members have apologized to the victims and their families. Michelle Knight wrote a book titled Life After Darkness: Finding Healing and Happiness After the Cleveland Kidnapping in 2018. Gina De Jesus also published a memoir titled Hope, a Memoir of Survival in Cleveland. There are also multiple documentary projects and 2 feature films about the terrifying kidnapping mission. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Heather Maples. Heather Nicole Maples was born on August 23, 1992, in Ocala, Florida. Her mother, Jennifer Hunter, had called Heather the storm baby because she had always been full of energy and courage, which had made many people jealous. In 2004, Jennifer Hunter gave birth to her second child. Heather had been very happy to welcome her younger brother Ryan into her life. However, Ryan was later diagnosed with developmental delays. Heather spent all her free time taking care of Ryan, helping him learn to talk, walk, and eat. In the following years, Heather showed her love and devotion to her younger brother. Until her graduation, she devoted all her time to Ryan. At the age of 22, Heather Maples decided to leave her hometown of Texas and start a new chapter in Tennessee, where she pursued her dream of becoming a psychologist. Heather's journey began when she received a call from her old classmate, Chaz. He had invited her to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where he was studying. Chaz believed that this had been the perfect place for Heather, where she could get a good opportunity to prepare for college. Heather accepted the invitation and went to Murfreesboro in January 2015. There, she started a new life and her relationship with Chaz grew stronger and they became lovers. With the support of her best friend Kelsey, Heather found an office job in the area where they lived. She had to balance her work in college preparation, but everything seemed to be going well. However, Heather's relationship with Chaz did not last long. Soon, they decided to break up. Chaz moved away, leaving Heather alone in Murfreesboro. In early August, Heather had been excited to call her mother to share the great news. Heather had been accepted to college, and her mother had been so proud. On a normal morning at her real estate brokerage firm in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, on August 7th, 2015, Kelsey Price had arrived at work and begun her daily routine. However, she had noticed that her friend and co-worker, Heather, had been running late as usual. Kelsey had decided to call Heather to wake her up but had received no response. Remembering Heather's plans for the night before, Kelsey hadn't been worried because Heather had asked her to pick her up if she overslept or didn't answer the phone. So, Kelsey had decided to go to Heather's apartment to wake her up. Heather's apartment had been in the same complex where they had worked. When she arrived, Kelsey had found the front door unlocked and had gone inside. She had found Heather lying on her bed, sleeping on her stomach, wearing only a crop top and no underwear. At first, Kelsey had thought Heather had had a wild night, but when she had tried to wake her up and had gotten no response, she had begun to worry. Kelsey had tapped Heather's leg, but there had still been no response. When she had touched Heather's leg, Kelsey had noticed that her leg had been very cold and had felt terrified. Kelsey Price had left the apartment and immediately called 911. Emergency services had quickly arrived on the scene. Detective Tommy Massey had been one of the first to arrive at the crime scene. He and the forensic team had conducted a thorough search of the apartment. There, they had discovered that Heather had been brutally beaten, showing signs of torture and sexual assault. Heather's hair had been covered in blood and splattered against the walls. Detective Massey and his partner, Detective Maples, had recalled the case as a terrifying nightmare. Witnessing this heartbreaking scene had been difficult, especially since they had shared the same last name as the victim, Heather Maples. Detectives had quickly realized that the case could be related to Heather's personal life. At that time, most of her friends had been suspected because they had all been close to Heather. In particular, her apartment had shown no signs of forced entry, suggesting that the attacker might have been invited in by Heather. While examining the scene, detectives had discovered several important pieces of evidence. Among them, an unidentified DNA sample and a hair that hadn't belonged to Heather had both been sent for analysis. In addition, a bloody fingerprint on the right side of Heather's bed had been a very important clue. According to Detective Massey, if someone had intentionally created a fingerprint, the trace wouldn't have been so clear. This fingerprint had also been sent for analysis in order to find the perpetrator. Heather's cell phone had been found in her apartment, but without a password, the police couldn't access the phone. At this time, Kelsey had played an important role in helping the police with the phone and also in notifying Heather's mother of her death. Detective Massey had hoped to get more information about Heather from her friend Kelsey Price. Kelsey had said that the relationship between Heather and Chaz had been quite tense because Chaz had had anger management problems and had been sometimes too aggressive with Heather. Therefore, Heather had decided to end this relationship. Having received important information, the police had decided to investigate Chaz immediately. However, an unexpected development had occurred when a young man named Michael had appeared at the crime scene. He had had the key to Heather's apartment and said he had met Heather at a bar. Michael had said that he hadn't had sex with Heather. Michael had testimony that the evening before Heather had died, she had called him and invited him to dinner. After dinner, Michael had gone home, and Heather had gone to a local bar with friends. Heather had called Michael at 11:40 to ask for help because she had been having trouble at a bar. A man named Ottavio had been bothering her and making her uncomfortable. Michael had agreed to go to the bar to help and then had driven Heather home. When they had arrived at the house, Heather had called Michael and asked him to buy some things, including biscuits, gravy, eggs, and sausage. After buying those things, Michael had driven Heather home and seen her go up the stairs. That had been the last time he had seen Heather, at approximately 2:30 a.m. on August 7th. During questioning, Michael had explained that he had had Heather's key and often unlocked the front door for her. He had also said that Heather's front door had often been left unlocked because she hadn't had a pocket for her keys. Investigators had taken Michael's fingerprints and DNA, but the results of the analysis had shown that they hadn't matched the fingerprints and DNA found at the crime scene. After Michael had been cleared as a suspect, investigators had turned their attention to the man who had been with Heather that night, Ottavio. Kelsey's help in unlocking Heather's cell phone had raised the police's suspicions of Ottavio. Detectives had discovered that Heather had texted Ottavio, a friend of hers, inviting him to her apartment just hours before she was found dead. When asked about Ottavio, a friend of Heather's had said, "I didn't know much about him. He seemed like a really nice guy. He was funny." When asked why Heather had sent this friend a photo of herself and Ottavio, the friend had been unclear. However, when questioned further, the friend had explained that Ottavio had been more aggressive than usual at the bar, and Heather had been taken by surprise. She had not been prepared for this. Detectives had decided to speak to Ottavio to get his side of the story. Ottavio had said he had been hanging out with Heather. Ottavio and Heather had had some tequila and then had gone to the gym for a while. When asked about the photo of Ottavio and Heather, Ottavio had said it had been taken before they left for the gym. The photo had been taken by Heather and posted on Snapchat. The detectives had immediately realized that Ottavio had known nothing about Heather's death. But what if he had been involved in the case? Meanwhile, the interrogation had continued. The police had said that Heather had texted him and asked him to come to her house. However, Ottavio had denied it. When asked about Heather's late-night text, Ottavio had said that she had texted him around 2:30 but that he had fallen asleep and only saw the text the next morning. The detectives had escalated their questioning of Ottavio with a harsh interrogation method. They had told him that people had seen him at Heather's apartment, that there had been surveillance footage of him, and that there had been pictures of him with Heather. They had said that Ottavio had gone to Heather's apartment after she had texted him to come back, and then something had happened. They had also told him that there had been strange DNA all over Heather and that it would be compared to his DNA. Ottavio had been shocked by what he had heard. He had seemed genuinely clueless about what had happened to Heather. After questioning, he had agreed to a DNA test, believing that it would clear his name. The results had proved him right, as the DNA found at the crime scene did not match his, so the police had eliminated Ottavio as a suspect. Detectives had continued to investigate, reviewing surveillance footage and carefully examining every detail provided by witnesses, but had still had no leads on the case. On the 9th day of the investigation, Detective Massey had been about to leave the office late at night when he had received an important call from a forensic lab director. The call had brought the answer Massey had been waiting for regarding the bloody fingerprints found on Heather's bed. The prints had been matched to a young man named Brandon Bowling, who had a fingerprint record from a previous job at a company. While questioning Brandon, Detective Massey had asked Brandon how he had known Heather. Brandon had replied that they had met at the gym. Massey had continued by asking Brandon when exactly he had met Heather. It had been clear that Detective Massey had been taking a lighthearted approach to the interview, wanting to give Brandon a chance to explain what had happened that night. After hours of questioning Brandon, he admitted that he had last been to Heather's apartment in July and had never seen her again. However, the police produced evidence of his fingerprints on Heather's bed, which matched his own. Since the fingerprints collected from Heather's house were fresh, the detectives believed that Brandon was lying. Apparently, Brandon had some secrets and was hiding them, which raised suspicions about him. Brandon seemed to realize that all the evidence was against him and that he could be arrested, but he continued to deny any involvement in Heather's death. After questioning, the investigators asked Brandon to provide a DNA sample, claiming that if he was innocent, the test results would prove it. Brandon agreed and hoped to be released from police custody, but that did not happen. Investigators asked the court for permission to access Brandon's phone to track his movements, calls, and texts on the night of the murder. When the court granted permission, they discovered a video on Brandon's phone that shocked even the most experienced detectives. In the video, Heather's room was recorded, capturing everything from intimate behavior to beatings. Heather was still alive at the time of the recording. As a result, Brandon Richmond Bowling was arrested. In February 2018, Brandon pleaded guilty to assaulting Heather Maples. Consequently, he was sentenced to 40 years in prison without the possibility of parole. During the trial, Heather's mother, Jennifer, made a strong impression with her emotional speech. She announced that she forgave Brandon Bowling for the crimes he had committed against her family. After the trial ended, Jennifer met Brandon Bowling's mother in the hallway. There, she expressed her sympathy and shared the woman's pain with a warm hug. She said that they both lost a loved one that day. Unfortunately, however, Brandon Bowling never revealed the real reason behind his actions, leaving many questions and thoughts about his motives. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Mike Williams. Jerry Michael Williams was born on October 16, 1969, in Bradfordville, just north of Tallahassee. His parents worked as a bus driver and a kindergarten teacher. To those close to him, he was known as Mike. Despite financial struggles, which led to Mike and his older brother being raised in a trailer, but their childhood was filled with happiness. Furthermore, Mike's parents prioritized their son's education, setting aside money for their future instead of building a new home. Both boys attended North Florida Christian High School, where Mike excelled academically and socially. He served as student council president, played soccer, and actively participated in the Key Club. At 15, Mike developed a passion for duck hunting and met Denise Merrill, a cheerleader and council secretary. They began dating and formed a close bond. Their friends viewed Mike and Denise as a well-suited couple. During high school, Denise introduced Mike to Brian Winchester, and they became inseparable friends. Brian later befriended Kathy Thomas, and the two couples remained lifelong friends. After graduating from high school, Mike attended Florida State University, where he studied political science and urban planning. Denise and Mike graduated together, with Denise becoming a public accountant and Mike pursuing a career as a real estate appraiser. Mike was a hardworking individual who consistently put in 15-hour days, which ultimately led to his rapid career advancement. His personal life also flourished, as he married Denise in 1994. Around the same time, his friend Brian married Kathy. The two couples remained close friends. Mike was deeply devoted to his wife and worked tirelessly to provide for their family, exhibiting remarkable enthusiasm and dedication. At 31, Mike Williams was thriving as a real estate appraiser, earning nearly $200,000 annually. He and his wife lived in a small upscale neighborhood on the east side of town, and welcomed a daughter, Ensley, in 1999. Despite engaging in risky activities, but he was always cautious and wanted to ensure that his family would be well provided for in the event of an emergency. He turned to his best friend, Brian, an insurance agent, to purchase two insurance policies, one for $250,000 and another for $500,000. After his father's sudden death in 2000, Mike felt a strong need to secure his family's financial future, so he turned to a friend for help again. Brian assisted him in obtaining a life insurance policy with a value of $1 million. 6 months before Mike disappeared, he bought life insurance worth nearly $2 million. On December 16, 2000, Mike woke up early to go duck hunting on Lake Seminole, a large reservoir connected to the Apalachicola River. It was Mike's 6th wedding anniversary, and he planned to celebrate with his wife Denise that night. However, when Denise and their daughter waited for Mike to return home at noon, he failed to show up. Denise became concerned and called her father. Her father then contacted Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. Brian and his father went to Lake Seminole, where they found Mike's Ford Bronco parked near the boat dock, but there was no sign of Mike. They searched the areas where Mike liked to hunt but couldn't find him or his boat. They decided to contact the police. Investigators from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency were called in, and a search for Mike began. Later, a helicopter pilot spotted the boat drifting 225 feet from the boat ramp. When the boat was searched, Mike's shotgun was found, still in its case, shows that he has not used it. The search operation shifted from rescue to recovery. Locals believe the area was once an orchard before the three rivers were dammed to create the lake. The lake was nicknamed Stump Field due to the numerous remaining tree stumps above and below the waterline, which posed a hazard to motorized boats. Searchers hypothesized that Mike's boat struck a stump, causing him to fall into the water. His boots, filled with water, may have weighed him down, leading to his possible drowning. Additional agencies, including a dive team from Montgomery, Alabama, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, joined the search. Despite a thorough search, but no signs of Mike were found. As the days passed, the operation transitioned from rescue to a body recovery mission. Search teams used probe poles to scour the lake's bottom, and service dogs were brought in to assist. 10 days after, a hunting hat with a camouflage pattern was found, but there was no evidence connecting it to Mike. Officials from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency speculated that Mike might have been consumed by alligators, which were abundant in the lake. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement found no evidence of foul play, reinforcing the theory that the incident was accidental. After a 5-week search, the effort to find Mike was halted. The following day, Denise organized a memorial service for her husband. Although Denise seemed to have accepted Mike's departure, his mother still found it difficult to accept. 6 months later, in June 2001, a fisherman discovered a pair of boots floating in the lake. A dive team searched the area and found a hunting jacket and a working flashlight on the lake floor. Inside the jacket pocket was Mike's hunting license, complete with his name and signature. The discovery raised several questions. Notably, neither the jacket nor the boots showed signs of an alligator attack, such as teeth marks. Additionally, none of the items appeared to have been in the water for 6 months, as the boots were not slimy. A week after the discovery, Denise's lawyer petitioned the court to declare Mike dead, citing the found items as evidence. The lawyers suggested that aquatic life, including alligators, might have consumed Mike's body entirely. The court approved this, and a death certificate was issued, stating that Mike died on December 16, 2000, due to accidental drowning while duck hunting on Lake Seminole. Mike's body was never recovered. Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, continues to search for her son, although this causes tension in her relationship with Denise. Denise demanded Cheryl stop searching and accept reality, threatening that if she continued, she would never see her granddaughter again. Cheryl refused to give up. She was determined to find Mike. Her perseverance ultimately led to the reopening of the investigation into Mike's disappearance. It took Cheryl 3 years of tireless efforts, including making phone calls, putting up signs, writing to the governor of Florida, compiling evidence, and contacting reporters, to convince law enforcement officials to open an investigation into Mike's disappearance. Cheryl later revealed that her contacted Matthew Oresco, an expert on alligators. Oresco explained that alligators do not eat during the cold winter months due to low water temperatures, and their main priority is maintaining body heat. Temperatures as low as 14 degrees make alligators uninterested in food. Additionally, according to Oresco, alligator attacks always leave behind forensic evidence. 3 years later, Cheryl convinced law enforcement to dismiss the alligator theory and start a formal investigation into her son's disappearance. New discoveries regarding the behavior of alligators prompted a re-examination of the case. Evidence from interviews and data suggested that Mike's death was not an accident. Former investigator Ronnie Austin stated, My instinct tells me Mike did not die in Lake Seoul, and that's what most law enforcement agencies working on this case agree on. Austin worked on Mike's case at the 2nd District State's Attorney's Office. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency initially handled the case as a missing hunter incident. They dedicated 735 hours to searching a 10-acre area of the lake for Mike's body, but surprisingly they did not find any signs of crime. Years later, those involved in the search, including police officer David Arnett, who was present at the scene, expressed that several things seemed unusual from the start. Firstly, it was unusual for Mike to hunt alone. Additionally, his truck was found in an undeveloped area, which would have required him to drag the boat through mud, rather than using the nearby concrete boat launch that he typically used. The severe storm that night should have pushed the boat towards the east shore, but it was instead found on the west shore. Additionally, the boat's motor was not running, yet it was still full of gasoline. If Mike had been operating the boat and fallen out, the boat would have continued to float in circles until it ran out of fuel. Law enforcement initially believed Mike's death was a simple drowning, but they later began to suspect foul play. However, by that time, the crime scene had already been trampled by numerous volunteers and searchers. A vital piece of evidence, a vehicle, was taken by Mike's family without being inspected by investigators. Additionally, some potential witnesses were overlooked. Denise and Brian were identified as suspects when investigators found out that Brian had just gone through a divorce from his previous wife, Kathy, and then quickly married Denise. Furthermore, Denise had received nearly $2 million from Mike's life insurance policy. Detectives also found it suspicious that Brian had sold Mike the policy. The investigation raised more red flags when Denise, Mike's wife, showed no interest in helping with the investigation and tried to prevent Mrs. Sherrill from participating in the search. Denise even prohibited Sherrill from speaking with her granddaughter. When questioned, Brian provided an alibi, claiming he was at home, 60 miles from the lake, on the morning of Mike's disappearance. His ex-wife, Kathy, corroborated his story. Brian also mentioned that he had planned to go hunting with his father-in-law that morning but overslept. Denise's interrogation did not reveal any new information. In 2008, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement concluded that Mike's disappearance was not an accident, which is a criminal offense. However, due to insufficient evidence, they were unable to prosecute. Despite this, Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, continued to seek answers. The case was featured on the Discovery Cable channel in 2011, but Cheryl became increasingly frustrated with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, feeling that they were either incompetent or uninterested in solving the case. In 2012, she began writing daily letters to Governor Rick Scott, requesting that he either reassign the investigation to another agency or appoint a special prosecutor. Over the course of 9 years, Cheryl sent 2,600 letters to the governor. Meanwhile, Denise and Brian's marriage was deteriorating. In 2012, Denise discovered Brian's infidelity, leading to their breakup. Denise filed for divorce the following year. During the lengthy divorce proceedings, an appraisal of their former home was scheduled in an effort to resolve their property disputes. This brought progress in Mike's case, as tensions between Denise and Brian reached a boiling point. Brian wanted to continue the marriage, but Denise wanted a divorce, because they were constantly arguing, and things were further complicated by the stress of Mike's investigation. Brian started calling Denise repeatedly, but she stopped answering his calls. He became overwhelmed by the stress in their relationship. On August 5, 2016, Denise was set to have her home appraised as part of a court order. That morning, she left her home to drive to work at Florida State University. While speaking with her sister on the phone, she noticed someone climbing over the back seat of her car. It was Brian. Brian pressed a loaded gun against Denise's and instructed her to drive straight ahead. Brian said he did this extreme thing because she had quit answering his phone calls. Denise attempted to calm Brian down by agreeing with him and promising to give their marriage another chance. Brian seemed to believe her. Denise assured him that she wouldn't report the incident to the police, and Brian exited the vehicle. As he left, he took several items with him, including a brown sheet, plastic sheeting, a bleach sprayer, and tools. It became clear that Denise had narrowly escaped a potentially fatal situation. She immediately called emergency services, and Brian was quickly arrested. He was charged with kidnapping, a first-degree felony in Florida that carries a maximum life sentence. He also faced charges of domestic violence and burglary. The court ordered Brian to be held without bail. Cheryl Williams expressed hope that Brian's arrest might lead to a breakthrough in her son's case. Cheryl shared with the New York Daily News, Brian did not want Denise to keep all that money for herself. Cheryl hoped Brian will reveal what really happened. And ultimately, Brian did share what had transpired. Brian managed to negotiate a very favorable deal with the prosecutor, avoiding a life sentence, and then began telling his story. He explained that it all started when he discovered a note in Kathy's purse, revealing that she was cheating on him. This sparked a desire for revenge in Brian. Around that time, Brian and his friends, including Denise and her husband Mike, would often go to bars and concerts together. Brian had known Denise since high school, but he had never been attracted to her until Kathy's infidelity. His perspective on Denise changed after being cheated on. In October 1997, Brian and Denise started an affair. Initially, it was just a casual encounter at a rock concert, but it quickly developed into regular and secret dates. They would meet at hotels during the workday whenever they had the chance. Brian made it clear that he did not want to divorce Kathy, and Denise was adamant that she would never leave her husband Mike, as she cared deeply about public opinion and did not want to risk losing custody of her daughter. As their relationship progresses, it deepens and they begin to consider themselves a couple, often exchanging gifts and writing romantic letters to each other. They realized they couldn't continue living like this, as they couldn't bear to be apart. However, Denise did not think about getting a divorce because she wanted people to think she was a good and moral person. Around this time, Mike had a near-death experience in a hunting accident, and Brian saved his life. This gave Denise a ray of hope that they could get out of their current situation. After negotiating the deal with the prosecutor, Brian revealed that in the year 2000, he and Denise started discussing the possibility of Mike and Kathy dying. Denise wanted to make it look like an accident rather than a murder. After considering various options, Brian and Denise planned to fake a boating accident. This would allow them to collect the maximum amount from Mike's life insurance policy before it expired at the end of December 2000. They devised a plan, and Brian invited Mike on a hunting trip to a spot on Lake Simal's shores, telling him to bring his wading boots. The boots were crucial, as it was believed that wearing them would lead to rapid drowning if Mike fell overboard. However, when Brian pushed Mike into the water, the plan didn't unfold as expected. Instead of sinking, Mike grabbed onto nearby stumps and began wading towards the shore. Brian was in a state of panic. He didn't know how to handle the situation. Mike was loudly calling for help, and Brian felt overwhelmed. In his panic, Brian grabbed his shotgun and shot Mike in the head without thinking. The plan had gone terribly wrong, and now Brian had to cover up the incident. Time was running out because he had to go home and prepare for a hunting trip with his father-in-law. Since no one knew Brian was at the lake with Mike, he decided to return home and pretend he had overslept. He drove back, hoping to find his wife, Kathy, still asleep. Brian entered the house quietly, finding Kathy asleep and his phone on the floor. He went to bed, called his father-in-law to apologize, and began creating an alibi for himself. Meanwhile, he hid Mike's body. Denise didn't know what really happened when Mike went missing. Brian attempted to confess to her, but she refused to listen. She preferred to believe that Mike's disappearance was an act of God, allowing her to move on with her life. According to Brian, he and Denise made a promise to each other to keep the truth hidden forever. Denise and Brian claimed that Mike's death was necessary because they couldn't live together. They stated that the life insurance payout was just an added benefit. Brian would later testify in court. However, investigators discovered that Brian had planted evidence, including a hat, boots, flashlight, and license, to mislead searchers and create false evidence to declare Mike dead, allowing Denise to collect the insurance. Denise received around $2 million, including Social Security and other benefits. On May 8, 2018, Denise was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and accessory to a felony, carrying a life sentence. She pleaded not guilty to all charges. In February 2019, Denise was sentenced to life in prison. 5 months later, her daughter Ansley received Mike's assets and insurance payout. Denise appealed the conviction and life sentence in January 2020. Her attorney arguing before the Florida First District Court of Appeal that there was no evidence of her direct involvement in the murder. In November 2020, Denise's murder conviction was overturned. However, her 30-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder was upheld, and she is currently serving her sentence at the Florida Women's Reception Center. Denise is expected to be released when she is 78 years old. Brian was transferred to the Madison Correctional Institute in Florida to serve the remainder of his sentence. He is scheduled to be released on July 30, 2036, when he will be 67 years old. Ansley, Mike and Denise's daughter, maintains her mother's innocence and blames Brian. Ansley has refused to speak to the media about the case and personal life. According to Cheryl and Nick, Ansley's uncle, they have been unable to reconnect with Ansley. Cheryl expressed her sorrow, stating that she has not only lost her son but also her connection with her granddaughter.